In 2024, more than 100,000 birds died in the Klamath Basin. It was one of the worst waterfowl die-offs on record. For more than a decade, Klamath had been starved of water. Historic wetlands were reduced to dust. Habitat that once supported millions of waterfowl disappeared. As water levels dropped and birds concentrated into shrinking pools, disease, avian botulism, spread rapidly across the basin. The crisis was visible, and it demanded a response. And that crisis matters far beyond this basin. For generations, the lower Klamath refuges have been one of the most important breeding, molting, and migration staging areas in the Pacific Flyway. Birds from across the West depend on this landscape. In strong water years, it's one of the most productive waterfowl regions in North America. But the refuges stand at the end of a long and complicated water system. When water is scarce and other demands are prioritized, Klamath is left dry. California waterfowl understands the future of waterfowl hunting depends on conservation. That's why we'll always stand for Klamath. And we don't stand alone. Working alongside the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Klamath Drainage District, the Tulelake Irrigation District, farmers, and other committed partners, California waterfowl helped change the trajectory of the refuges. Together, we worked to find solutions. We restored hundreds of acres of wetland habitat across the region. Our advocacy team worked with lawmakers and decision makers to ensure that waterfowl were part of water allocation and infrastructure decisions. And most recently, through coordinated effort and partnership, water was pumped back into the refuges. For the first time in at least a decade, Lower Klamath was flooded at scale. And when the water returned, the birds responded. Duck production reached levels not seen since the late 1980s and early 1990s. Botulism declined. Fish and migratory birds found habitat again. The landscape looked alive. What we saw was remarkable. Thousands upon thousands of ducks and geese returned to the basin. Pintail, widgeon, mallards, speckled-bellied geese, and more, filling the wetlands once again. Flocks stretched across the horizon, lifting off the water in waves and settling back down into habitat that had been dry for years. For the first time in a long time, Klamath looked the way it was meant to look. When the water returned, Klamath didn't just improve, it transformed. Wetlands that had been dry and silent filled again and were alive with birds. What had become a duck desert was restored to functioning habitat. This is what happens when conservation is backed by action, investment, and partnership. We've proven that Klamath can recover when water is delivered and habitat is restored. But Klamath remains vulnerable. It remains at the end of the line when water is scarce. Without long-term solutions, the basin could face the same crisis again. That's why California waterfowl is committed to facilitating the flow-through concept, reducing pumping costs through solar and hydropower investments, strengthening water infrastructure, and securing reliable operation and maintenance funding for the refuges. This isn't a short-term fix. It's a long-term commitment to one of the most important waterfowl landscapes in the Pacific Flyway. When Klamath thrives, the Flyway thrives. When it dries up, the consequences are felt across California. We've seen what happens without water. We've seen what's possible when conservationists, agencies, irrigation districts, and partners work together. Now, we must secure lasting solutions. Help California waterfowl support the Klamath refuges. Raise your voice to ensure that water remains part of Klamath's future. because the future of waterfowl hunting depends on Klamath. And Klamath depends on hunter conservationists like you.